Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, I continue sharing with you the emotional journey of Lythieuca. In the previous episode, Lythieuca made a decision that seemed simple, yet held tremendous meaning for her life, learning to read and write. Because she could not read, she had suffered many disadvantages, from doing only heavy labor, to being unable to read documents on her own, to staying silent out of fear that others would discover her limitations. All of this made her feel small, as if she stood outside every opportunity. Hung saw it all. He understood her feelings of inferiority, understood the moments when she avoided situations, afraid to sign a paper or to be asked anything involving reading and writing. That was why he patiently encouraged her, little by little planting confidence and hope in her heart. He told her that once she learned to read, she would see the world open before her. She would become stronger, have a voice, and most importantly, she would one day be able to teach little Tony herself, walking beside her child on the path of growing up. Lythieuca thought about it a great deal. There were nights she lay awake until dawn, wanting to try but fearing she would not keep up. But the thought of Tony growing a little more each day made her unable to hesitate any longer. Finally, she made her decision. When Tony went to the city for physical therapy, she would enroll in an evening literacy class and begin her journey. That decision made Hung so happy that his eyes always sparkled whenever he looked at her. He said he was proud, very proud, that she had not given up before the limitations that had held her back for so many years. And he felt tenderness for her too. He felt for the years she struggled to survive, for the times she quietly endured hurt when others unknowingly wounded her just because she could not read or write. That tenderness made him want to spend the rest of his life making it up to her. The next morning, while Lythieuca was tidying the kitchen, Hung brought her a bag of school supplies he had prepared himself. New notebooks, pencils, ink pens, a ruler, even a small cloth bag for her books. Everything was chosen carefully. He even bought a small board so she could practice writing at home, afraid that it would be difficult at first, so he prepared everything to make it easier for her. Not only that, during the time Tony was taken to the city for physical therapy, Hung quietly arranged everything else for Lythieuca. He researched, asked around, contacted continuing education centers, and finally chose an evening class for adults, a place where people like her, who had missed the chance to study because of life circumstances, could start again from the beginning. He hoped that such an environment would make her feel less self-conscious, less ashamed, and more confident. When Hung handed her the registration form, Lythieuca stood still for a long moment. Her hand trembled slightly, not out of fear but because she was overwhelmed with emotion. All her life, she had believed that going to school was something meant for others, not for her. She had never imagined a day when she would hold a pen to write the first letters of her life, let alone that someone would prepare an entire path for her to walk on. Hung just stood quietly watching her, his gentle smile seeming to say that he believed she could do it. Lythieuca did not speak, yet in her eyes, a faint light began to appear, a light of hope, of change, of a future she had never dared to dream about. And so, her life was about to turn to a new page. A new journey, where she would no longer stand outside the world of knowledge, but would step into it, daring to learn, daring to change herself for her own sake and for the child who always needed her. Stay tuned for today's video to see the very first steps of Lythieuca's learning journey, a journey that may move many more people than they expect. After Tony was taken to the provincial center for physical therapy, Hung quietly handled nearly everything else for Lythieuca. He did not want her to feel confused or overwhelmed, so every day during his breaks he searched for information about adult literacy classes. He asked friends, called different centers, and even visited them in person to check whether the learning environment would suit her. And then, at last, Hung chose an evening class, a place where people with circumstances like hers could start again from the very first letters. He hoped that this class would open a new door for her, a future she once believed existed only in dreams. When Hung told her he had found a class, Hoai was so moved she could barely speak. She had never imagined she would have the chance to study like others. As a child, she would stand from afar watching schoolchildren with their books and bags, her eyes filled with both fascination and sadness. She had wanted so much to learn, to know how to read, but life never gave her a peaceful enough childhood to sit at a school desk. And now, as a mother, watching Tony struggle through each small step in therapy, she understood even more clearly the value of knowledge. She did not want her child to grow up without a mother who could guide him, did not want Tony to ask her a question she could not answer. Thinking of that only strengthened her resolve. That afternoon, the sun had just faded and a light breeze drifted in from the hallway, gently lifting the corner of her shirt. When she walked Tony to the therapy room, she clutched the fabric as if seeking a small anchor for her nerves. Her breathing trembled, her heartbeat was so rapid she could hear it. This was the first time she had ever begun something completely new, something she had never believed she was brave enough to do. Excitement, anxiety, and hope intertwined, leaving her both emotional and afraid she would not be able to keep up. But when she reached the doorway of the literacy class, a warm scene unfolded before her. The old wooden door was slightly open, and inside the room glowed with a soft golden light. Learners of all ages were finding their seats, young workers still in their uniforms, people in their 40s carefully arranging their books, even elderly students with graying hair slowly choosing a spot. Each person carried their own story and their own hardships, yet they all gathered here sharing the same starting point. What surprised Hoai most was that no one looked at her with judgment or discomfort. Instead, when she stepped in timidly, several people smiled kindly at her, as if they had known her for years. Someone nodded politely, another offered her a seat, and all of it created a warmth she did not expect. The teacher stood at the front of the class with a gentle, compassionate gaze. She was not very young, her voice calm and warm, yet full of quiet strength. When she saw Hoai hesitating by the door, she softly said, "Come in. Here, everyone starts from zero." The words were so tender that Hoai's heart tightened. She slowly walked in and sat at a wooden desk in the third row. On the desk lay a clean notebook and a pencil already sharpened. She touched the first blank page, and for a moment it felt as though her entire life was being rewritten from this very sheet of paper. Once the classroom settled, the teacher looked around and spoke with deep sincerity. "Not knowing how to read is not your fault. But choosing to change, that is courage." Just one sentence, yet it struck the deepest part of Hoai's heart. Her eyes burned. Years of shame, the countless times she had been looked down upon, the many moments she had to stay silent even when she longed to speak, all of it rushed back at once. And in that moment, she realized she had not been wrong to step into this room. She was doing the most meaningful thing she could for herself and for her child. She lowered her head slightly, tightening her grip on the pencil. The journey ahead would surely be difficult, but for the first time in her life, Hoai felt that she truly had hope. Because this was an intensive class designed for people who needed to quickly catch up with basic literacy, each session covered a large amount of material. The curriculum was dense, from the very first pencil strokes to blending syllables, reading sentences, and writing short paragraphs. For most learners, it was already a major challenge. For Hoai, who had barely ever touched written letters, it was even more difficult. On the very first day, when the class began practicing the basic strokes, her struggle was immediately noticeable. She held the pencil in her hand, but her fingers trembled. Her hand was not used to guiding the stroke straight or smooth or in the exact way the teacher demonstrated. Others around her quickly completed the basic strokes, while she kept fumbling over a single sheet of paper, each line shaky and slanted to one side. Seeing everyone write so quickly made her panic for a moment. A small, self-doubting voice echoed inside her. They are writing so fast. Can I keep up? If I am slower, will anyone be bothered? She lowered her head, pressed her lips together, and tightened her grip on the pencil. But before her worries could grow heavier, the teacher gently walked to her desk. There was no hint of impatience or frustration in the teacher's eyes, only calm patience. She bent slightly, pointed kindly to each of Hoai's strokes, and said in a warm, steady tone, "It is all right. Take your time. Writing slowly but correctly is more important than writing fast." The way the teacher spoke, the way she stood beside her like a companion rather than a judge, helped Hoai breathe more easily. She lifted her pencil again and tried each stroke once more. Though still uneven, though far from perfect, every stroke that followed became a little steadier than the last. Her classmate sitting next to her, a young woman in her early 20s, leaned over and whispered encouragement. "It is okay, we are learning together. I have only been practicing for a few days myself." Those simple words washed over Hoai like a warm breeze. She smiled back, and for the first time that day, she felt she was not alone. No one laughed at her, no one criticized her. Everyone here was starting again from the beginning, everyone was trying just as hard, and everyone treated one another with empathy. The class ended when the sky had grown completely dark. The streetlights outside cast a soft glow into the room. Hoai stepped out with the others, her heart light yet filled with a quiet determination. The first pages of her notebook, though covered in crooked lines, were proof of a beginning filled with effort. When she returned to her rented room, Tony was already fast asleep after a tiring day of therapy. Gently, she placed him more comfortably on the bed and pulled a thin blanket over him. Just hearing his peaceful breathing eased half her exhaustion. But soon after, she sat at the small table by the window, opened her notebook, and picked up her pencil as though the time in class had not been enough. Every night, she used the moments after Tony fell asleep to practice writing. Her hand ached, her shoulder throbbed, her head spun from trying to remember how each letter was formed. Sometimes she was so tired that her wrist shook, but she never complained. Every stroke, every page was proof of her unwavering perseverance. Sweat dampened her forehead and sometimes dripped onto the paper, smudging the pencil marks, but she kept going. Her first letters were still unbalanced and shaky, but each line, each attempt held the strength of a woman who had never been given a chance to study, yet dared to start from the beginning. Days passed, and each class built upon the last. Her persistence slowly bore fruit. After just a few weeks, she was no longer as confused as before. Her hand moved faster, more confidently, and the letters appeared clearer and more even. She was no longer falling behind. In fact, there were days when the teacher chose her notebook as an example of effort. One day, while checking her notebook, the teacher was so pleasantly surprised that she smiled and praised her. "You are improving very quickly, Hoai. Keep this spirit, and you will go far." Such simple words might mean little to others, but to Hoai, they were the greatest encouragement she had ever received. She lowered her head, her lips forming a small but proud smile. For the first time, she truly felt she could change her life with her own hands. Since the day Hoai began attending classes, Hung quietly observed every small change in her. He knew she was working twice as hard as anyone else, caring for her child, handling housework, taking Tony to therapy during the day, then studying late into the night. On the days he traveled for work, when he called her on video, he often saw her sitting at the small desk in their rented room, the warm yellow light reflecting on her tired face, though her eyes shone brightly with determination. Each time he saw her like that, his heart tightened with both tenderness and pride. He knew she was trying for her own future, but above all, for Tony. And that quiet perseverance moved him so deeply that every time he returned from a work trip, He wanted to bring her a small gift, a way of encouraging her, letting her know she was not alone on this journey. The first gift he brought her was a simple but sturdy backpack. He took his time choosing it, picking one that was lightweight, with soft straps and a modest color so she would feel comfortable carrying it every day. When he handed it to her, he smiled and said, "To keep your books in." She hugged the backpack to her chest, her eyes softening with emotion. She had never owned a backpack of her own before. Another time, Hung brought her a set of new pens. Knowing she practiced writing every night, he chose pens with soft nibs that were easy to write with, reducing the strain on her wrist. He also selected multiple colors so she could mark her lessons and avoid confusion when studying difficult sections. When he gave them to her, he said gently, "If you write a lot, you will need new pens often. Just tell me when any of them run out." That simple line warmed her heart like an embrace. For years, she had used only the cheapest pens, pushing them until they barely wrote anymore. Now someone cared enough to notice even the smallest details of her life. The feeling almost made her breath catch. And then one day, Hung brought home a gift that left her completely stunned, a compact silver laptop, perfect for someone just beginning to learn. He placed the box on the table and opened the lid before her. She stared at it, afraid to touch it, as if it might vanish. To her, a laptop was a luxury, something only capable people or office workers needed. She had never imagined she would need one, or deserve one. Hung rested his hand on her shoulder and spoke with quiet confidence. "For finding materials, watching lessons, studying whenever you have time. You are improving so quickly, Hoai. I want you to have everything you need to follow your dreams." Then he gently patted her head, a gesture filled with affection and recognition, something she had never once received from anyone in her life. "You have worked hard. And you are doing really well." Just one simple sentence, yet it struck the softest part of her heart. All her efforts, all the nights she practiced until her hands ached, all the drops of sweat that had stained her notebook, everything finally felt seen, acknowledged, not with pity, but with true respect. Hoai lowered her head, her eyelashes trembling. Her eyes reddened, not from exhaustion or sadness, but because happiness was rising within her so strongly she could hardly contain it. She was a woman who once thought she had no worth, who had lived quietly to avoid being ridiculed, yet now, she was valued for every small step she took. She held the laptop tightly, her hands warm and trembling. In that moment, she understood she was no longer the girl she once was, the one who only dared to stand outside her own life. Now she was moving forward, slowly but steadily, full of hope. And beside her, was someone who watched over her, supporting her, step by step. From the moment Hoai learned to read and write, her life opened into an entirely new horizon. The letters that once appeared to her as strange symbols suddenly became familiar, comforting, and so essential that she wondered how she had lived so many years without them. Just reading a few simple lines made the world feel bigger, clearer. She no longer had to look away in embarrassment when seeing signs she could not understand, nor did she have to ask others to read basic information for her. For her, reading each word, understanding each sentence became a joy she had never known before. Most importantly, literacy helped her better understand Tony's therapy exercises. Previously, whenever teachers wrote instructions or sent materials, she had to listen with intense focus, trying to memorize everything out of fear she would forget something crucial. But now, she could read each line herself, highlight important points, and even look up additional information to help Tony practice more effectively. For her, learning to read was not just education, it was learning how to become a better mother. And something miraculous happened. Tony reacted quickly to the changes in his mother. Though he still could not talk, still behind other children his age and speech, his eyes became more alert, more expressive. Whenever Hoai sat beside him with simple alphabet cards to help him recognize shapes and letters, he followed with his eyes, his small hands reaching out to touch each character as if he could feel the new happiness entering his world. One day, she taught Tony to distinguish between a circle and a square. Tony did not speak, but he placed his hand on the circle without hesitation, then looked up at her with bright, expectant eyes, waiting for her praise. Hoai burst into a joyful laugh and hugged him tightly. Those tiny moments became powerful motivation for her to keep studying, to keep moving forward little by little. Beyond therapy exercises, she began applying what she learned in her literacy class to daily life, teaching Tony to identify objects, simple cognitive games, sensory motor activities suitable for his needs. She made little cards herself, writing words on them and drawing small, clumsy but loving illustrations. Every time Tony looked at them, his eyes seemed a little brighter, his reactions a little quicker. Seeing her son progress day by day filled Hoai with both gratitude and emotion. Some nights, after Tony had fallen asleep, she sat alone at her desk, staring at the filled notebook pages, many of which were smudged by her own sweat. She touched the letters with her fingertips, feeling as though she was touching her future, a future she once thought was too far out of reach. One afternoon, while Tony practiced with his teacher in the therapy room, Hoai stood outside the glass door watching him, her heart tightening with emotion. She whispered softly, as if speaking to herself. "Thanks to Hung, thanks to the class, our lives really have changed." In that moment, she could not help but smile, a gentle smile filled with gratitude, pride, and hope. All the exhausting days, the nights she stayed up practicing until her hands ached, the quiet tears shed from fear she would fall behind, all of it had become precious steps leading her to this moment, where she could teach her child with her own hands, confidently read the materials, and most importantly, truly feel herself changing. Her journey was still long, still full of challenges, but she knew she no longer walked it alone. She had her son, her class, her own determination, and Hung, the man who had placed in her hands the tools she needed to change her fate. Stay tuned for the next episode to follow more of Hoai's learning journey.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Hôm nay mải làm quá một đầu bù tóc rối luôn. Mình đang hoàn thiện nốt video nha mọi người. Mình đã làm xong phần nội dung và hình ảnh rồi. Bây giờ thì mình sẽ chỉnh sửa mấy bước cơ bản nữa thôi. Cảm ơn mọi người rất là nhiều vì đã theo dõi video của mình nhé. Tạm biệt mọi người và hẹn gặp lại mọi người trong những video sau. Bye bye.